Things your students may not know.
So here are some things that your students might not know how to do in Google Docs. And these skills, again, can be applied to a lot of word processing programs like Microsoft Word as well. Okay, so first thing, I'm going to go to my app launcher and get Docs. Depending on the device, the students might have a shortcut somewhere to Google Docs. I'm going to click a blank Google Doc. All right, so the first thing students want to remember how to do is to name the document. Now, what's really cool about this is I can type my title here, and if I just click, it'll pull out the very first line. So that works out really well. Okay, so one of the things, and I'm going to switch here to another model. I have one of my favorite music class songs from childhood here. One of the things that a lot of them don't know how to do is how to make capital letters. And again, these are things that you may not realize students might not know how to do, but dealing with third graders and fourth graders, I'm finding a lot of these little basic skills, somehow they just miss them. So to make a capital letter, you want to remind them to hold the shift key down and spend some time finding that shift key on the keyboard. Another thing that they often don't know how to do is how to go to the next line. So you want to teach them to make sure that the cursor's at the end. And that's really important. How many of us have accidentally hit enter or return and our cursor wasn't where we wanted it? So having them find the cursor, know exactly where it is, and then hit enter. Okay, so I'm going to do that again. So either hit enter or return, depending on what it's called on your device. Another great tool that a lot of students might not know how to use yet is the spell check tool. As you see here, I have a misspelled word, so we want to point out to them that the red line means that a word is misspelled. This is great for young writers because if they can sound out a word and get really close to it, it doesn't have to be perfect because the spell check will help. So we can go into tools and do spelling and grammar and run a spell check that way. Or we could just click on there and right click, and then most of the time the top answer is going to work. Not every time, so they really have to read it carefully. That right click trick is something else that you want to go over with your students. I notice especially my younger kids that come into third grade, they've worked with tablets mostly, and for some of them it's their first time working on a Chromebook or a laptop, and figuring out how to do that right click is whether you're using a mouse or a touchpad, so helping them figure that out. All right. One of the other things we want to do is changing the format. These format tools are pretty generic, and you'll see them in just about any word processing. So how to highlight it. And then one of the trickiest things for kids is changing the font and the size, because the font is usually whatever the default font is. A lot of times it's Arial because it's in alphabetical order. So if I tell them to find the tool to change the font, they don't really see it. So I always tell them that little trick where you hover over and it'll tell you what to do. So we can look for the font and change the font. And then size. Again, telling kids to look for that number can be really confusing. So I teach them that little trick where you hover over and then change the size to whatever size you want. Okay. Couple tricks as far as keyboard shortcuts that you might want to have them learn. My favorite for a lot of word processing things is Control A or Command A if you're on a Mac. It selects everything and it allows you to make everything match all at once. So if there's something you definitely know that you wanted to have it all be the same. Another one, of course, is Control or Command Z. That's one of the first things we want to teach them, because kids will accidentally highlight things and then type something. It happens all the time. And then they kind of get panicked. And teaching them that Control Z is that little safety net. All right, one last thing for part 1 is adding pictures. Okay, so we can go to insert image. We can also go to the insert image icon, and I'm going to do search the web, and I'm just going to pick a picture of a cat. Let's see which one looks like Senor Don Gato. Let's go with this guy. All right, and then I can click on it and hit insert, or I can drag it over. And this is the part lots of kids really like to do when they're working on their projects, is adding pictures. One of the things we want to teach them about adjusting size, because again, these are things that we may not even realize that they don't know how to do yet, is that you want to always use the handles around the corners. That keeps it in proportion. It doesn't matter which one, but that's going to let those size changes be in proportion. Because if they start to do this, then you get that funhouse mirror look. All right, so let me get that the size I want. And then the last thing we want to look at for formatting the image is the text wrapping. If you look at the little icons, it kind of symbolizes what the picture looks like in relationship to the text. So I'm going to click Wrap Text. And this is always a really cool feature because, let me make it a little smaller, you can see, because then it kind of has a look like a magazine sort of. And then you can also move it around and just have the words wrap around it. Okay, stay tuned for part 2, where I'm going to go into a couple other tricks that you can really use in Google Docs. And again, the whole purpose of this series of videos is just to show you the things that you may not realize your students don't know how to do yet.